Welcome, everyone, to another edition of SCRC's Let's Talk Caregiving. I'm your host, Roberto Velasquez, President and CEO of Southern Caregiver Resource Center, and I'm here as always with my co-host, Marta Rañón, our Executive Vice President. Hi, Marta.
Hey, Roberta.
Today we have a very special guest by the name of Catalina Maynard. Catalina is an actress. She's a native San Diegan. She's an artist, an educator, and was a former caregiver to her parents. She is also one of 6 cast members from Cygnet Theatre's fantastic play called El Huracán. SCRC, we partnered with Cygnet Theatre to promote El Huracán for National Caregivers Day this month of February because the play is centered around family, memories, crisis, and even caregiving and dementia. So we're really excited to have you here, Catalina, as one of the stars of the play El Huracán.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Catalina, if you can tell us a little bit more about this role that you play in El Huracán. I'm really curious to find out how this was put together, especially with the topic of dementia and all of the challenges that come with navigating that.
Well, I think what's really interesting is that the playwright, Charis Castro Smith, actually took her family experiences and decided to put this into play form. And of course, we have it on the backdrop of, right after Hurricane Andrew in Miami, Florida, and sort of just the experiences that happened during and after, and sort of what came up for her. And came up with her family experiences and the ideas of the generations of caring for individuals in her family, and sort of the just the challenges that come up in sort of the relationships, and how those can shift and change through the process of caregiving.
Yeah, and it's really it's a really interesting backdrop. I mean, it's during a crisis, right? It's during a hurricane, a Cuban American family, multi-generational, and here they are kind of hunkered down, basement style, and dealing with a lot of things because now all of a sudden they're all together all at once. Like many of our families, many caregivers are dealing with crises on a regular basis. Some might be environmental, like the weather, rains, storms. But the interesting thing about this play and how it relates so much to families is the matriarch of the family. I think her name is Valeria in the play. She's
Yes.
going on and talking about all her long-term memories and having and reminiscing because she's having problems with other memories, but she's good with her long-term memory.
Exactly.
Tell us about that, Catalina. That role that Valeria plays and how it relates to you in this play.
Sure. No, it's very interesting. So, Valeria is the matriarch of the family. And I don't want to give away too much because there's a lot of surprise
Uh-huh.
and absolutely magic that goes on in the play. But yes, she's a matriarch, and as the matriarch, she has had a past that is extremely magical. And again, she had to leave Cuba and come to the States, and had to leave a lot behind. And so, again, her life and how she remembers her life is what was established before she had to leave what she recognized as her home. And so that transition happened very early in her life.
So I'm wondering, as I'm hearing you describe the play, and I know we don't want to give too much away because we want people to join us on the 11th, and of course any other day that the play is playing to different
Absolutely.
audiences. What I wanted to know is, you talked about being a caregiver. And I'm sure you had, like all of us who have been caregivers, a lot of challenges, a lot of, maybe doubts or emotional turbulence that we were navigating during these journeys. I wonder what this play means to you, Catalina, as you having been a former caregiver.
Well, I have to say that it brings up a lot of feelings for me. It requires me to reflect and to be vulnerable again. You know,
Mhm.
those experiences, you think that I've I haven't been a caregiver to my parents because they both passed 11 and 12 years ago. But
Mm.
it's still very much there in my DNA, in my history,
Mhm.
right? And so when I'm on stage and I'm caring for, as Jimena for Valeria, um, what's interesting for me and what I feel is a blessing is that the instincts of caring come very much to the surface immediately. But what I
Mhm.
do have to deal with, and this is the hard part, is the feeling of being alone and feeling abandoned in many ways because I was the one that was stepping up to the plate to do most of it.
Mhm.
And how you do it because you feel in your heart and in your mind that no one else is going to do it. And many times that no one else is going to do it like you can.
Yeah, I tell you,
Uh-huh.
that's a very common feeling among caregivers. In fact, one of the
Oh, yes.
interesting things that we track when we are working with family caregivers is their levels of loneliness, and we actually use a validated instrument in assessment to determine whether how they score on a loneliness scale. And I would say that a good high percentage, between 20 and 30% of family caregivers are scoring high on the loneliness scale. This isolation, especially during this crisis that we've been in, which is the pandemic, COVID, it has really showcased or highlighted how desperate families are for connection, how much they need a break through some respite, how they need emotional support, because it's not just even just the physical help, but then just somebody to talk to on a regular basis. I know, Martha, that you've shared in the past stories about when you cared for your aunt, your great aunt. Um,
And not only that, but talking to many caregivers, what you just said, Catalina, is so true of so many of us that nobody else can do it as best as I can. So just let me just be the one to do it because I know how to do her coffee. I know how she wants her meal. I know how she likes to dress. But then what we are doing in essence is really taking on all of these responsibilities and not allowing others to maybe step up and help. So of course, I'm so curious to watch this play, but I'm also wondering if when you found yourself as a caregiver, were you able to recognize that in yourself and ask for help? How did you manage those responsibilities?
Um, yes and no, I would have to say. I was able to get help for certain things. That means asking maybe a family member to pick up certain things at the store so that I could stay with my mother if she was having a difficult time. Or there was a point where we were able to be, as things progress, we were able to move forward and get some time during the day when I was allowed to be out of the house, that sort of thing. But initially, it was overwhelming because I would go to work in the morning after having fed them their breakfast, come home and provide their lunch for them on my lunch hour,
Mhm.
eat in the car,
Mhm.
going back to work, and then come home and prepare their meal. And I'd have certain people come in and out. But at some point, that didn't work anymore. And I had to really evaluate and adjust on how that happened in the house, how who was going to take care of what.
I'm glad that you shared that story, Catalina, because I feel like sometimes as caregivers, we need to hear that from each other. That it's it's not easy, we know that, but sometimes we really put ourselves last and end up suffering in the process ourselves, right? We neglect our care, we forget about ourselves.
Yes, but and I want to say that psychologically though, for many of us, it's because we think that asking for help means that we have somehow failed in the caring
Mhm.
of our loved ones,
Mhm.
that we aren't that somehow we can't do it all and therefore we're not enough. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
feeling of not meeting the requirement or the need is something that carries that weighed heavy, at least on me.
Thank you again for sharing that, Catalina and Martha. I know this sounds very familiar to us. We are working with
Mm-hmm.
family caregivers on a regular basis, and many of them are dealing with very difficult situations. In addition to dementia, Alzheimer's disease, they also have other conditions like heart disease or diabetes or just frail and elderly and unbalanced and unstable. So you're constantly supervising. And one of the things that we can get into is that trap of I'm the only one, like you're talking about, I'm the only one that can do this. I don't trust anybody else. And one of the great things about Southern Caregiver Resource Center is that our family consultants really are high level skilled master's level social workers that are trained in caregiving and specialize in Alzheimer's, especially because that's about 90% of our clientele are caregivers caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's or related dementia. And they're so skilled at this that they're able to teach family caregivers how to be advocates for themselves, how to allow other people to help, how to even ask for help. And that help, asking for help, is not weakness. It is strength because it makes you stronger and it makes the whole family dynamic stronger and in turn better for the person you're caring for.
And in essence, that's why we exist as an organization, to help people such as ourselves, Catalina, all of the caregivers out there, because it really takes a lot to finally get to the point that you realize, I cannot do this by myself. I need some support. And I was a client because of that, because I got to the point where I can't do this. I need help. I need somebody to guide me, to understand me, to validate me, to really support me in these feelings, in these stressors, and then also how to incorporate some self care, which is a lot of what we do in our education and programming that we have.
Yeah, I would say that that's very important. I would have benefited an awful lot by having some kind of support system like this back when I was caretaking. Because again, as you mentioned, there is an awful lot of loneliness that goes along with it. But I don't want I want to make sure, I guess I should say, that I also talk about the joy that I had, that I
Hmm.
received from caregiving, the joy and the gifts that I received from seeing what it is to be a caregiver, and also seeing other caregivers come into my home and watch them share their gifts with my parents, and how they became
Hmm.
very much um, dedicated to making sure that my parents um, felt that, that this was their home and that they were going to support them in a way that allowed them to have a really happy and successful and safe day.
That's
Yes,
wonderful.
that is wonderful, and thank you for sharing that. I know, Marta, you incorporate into our educational programs a lot about how to make the best of a situation, how to enjoy while you're the caregiver, how to enjoy your work while you're caring, and you're doing such an important job of supervising that individual who's so dependent on you. But there's a lot of that in Martha's programming and in presentations out in the community. And there's also a battery of research now that talks about
Hmm.
the positive aspects of being a caregiver and that how that impacts that caregiver in their attitude and their ability to care for their loved one.
And I also think that maybe we are shifting as a society, right? That we are recognizing that a lot of us are caregivers. We might know someone who's a caregiver. We might need caregivers in the future. So there's something to be said about learning now what is available, what resources are out there, but also how to really approach caregiving. None of us are growing up saying, I can't wait till I have to take care of my parents. But when we do, are we prepared? And many of us are not. And that's why it's important to really reach out, really share stories, learn from Catalina, learn from all of the other wonderful caregivers who did the job the best they could, but also remembering that you need to take care of yourself so that you are also available for them, and then start building new memories, new experiences, seeing them maybe in a different light. Because as this play is going to demonstrate, we're dealing with memory loss. And so with memory loss, you forget some of these experiences, but now maybe as caregivers, we can create new ones.
And to speak to that, Martha, is that, the relationship sometimes shift when you become a caregiver of your parents. It's like you lose being a daughter, or you lose being a son, or you just lose that connection with them because the focus is so much on their daily care. And I remember missing being a daughter to my parents. And I think what having caregivers come into my home did was allow me to go back to being their daughter again, allowing me
Mm-hmm.
to have a relationship the way it not the way it used to be, but at least that I wasn't the one having to deal with all of it, and therefore being able to also put some things into practice in our home to enhance the joy. I know arts is a very big thing in my house, and I'm really blessed to have had that. And I know for my mom, especially as she was, you know, transitioning and so forth, music was very calming to her. And she might be sleeping or have her eyes closed, but she would be able to sing and knew the lyrics. And of course, for my mother, everything was in Spanish, at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad, and one of the big things they also enjoyed was I would just sit for a while and read to them out loud, and they'd sit there, and the three of us would connect in a way that had nothing to do with me being an advocate or an administrator or a caretaker. It allowed me to be just a daughter with my parents. So,
How beautiful is that you had that experience that maybe you didn't have when you were younger or growing up, and that would have never been something that you would think about doing. But now that you have had that experience, it's a new memory, new opportunity to engage with them in a different way. And I think that's what I take from my caregiving experience: new ways of connecting with our loved ones, so that we can better go forward and realize that, yeah, maybe that relationship, like you were saying, used to be one, and now it's a different one. But that's okay. It's about creating those different memories together.
Yeah, and I will just say in the last few minutes here that we have left for this podcast is that these changes in relationship, it's sometimes very difficult to undergo. Like you were saying, I mean, you're so correct in saying you miss being a daughter or a spouse. You're now a caregiver, you're a caretaker, your whole relationship is turned upside down, and there you go through this ambiguous loss part of your life where this person's still there, but they're not the same person. And so a lot of family caregivers go through depression too. It's important to connect to those resources. We have counseling programs at Southern Caregiver Resource Center that are specifically designed for caregivers and some of the challenges that they're going through. So there's so many resources and things that people can connect to. And so I really appreciate you coming in, Catalina, and sharing your stories with us. Just a great topic, and I'm so excited about watching the play, and I can't wait to be there and see you in action. I'm sure it's going to be so much fun to watch. In any event, that's all the time we have left for this edition of Let's Talk Caregiving. To hear more of our podcasts, follow us on your favorite podcasting platforms or visit our website at scrc.care. I want to thank Martha for co-hosting another important discussion, and our guest, Catalina Maynard, and our audience for tuning in. If you are providing support to a loved one, you don't have to do this alone. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. To connect to our programs and services, visit our website at scrc.care or call us at 1-800-827-1008. If you live outside of San Diego and Imperial Counties, visit caregivercalifornia.org to find the Caregiver Resource Center closest to you. To support our efforts and make a tax-deductible donation, please go to scrc.care and click on the Donate tab. And remember, SCRC is here for you,
Caring for those who care for others.
Thank you.